All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just to make sure you're all in the right location, this is the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines, what we've heard so far webinar this evening. Before I turn it over to Heba from the Office of Planning to take us through tonight's presentation, just wanted to walk through a couple of logistics. First off, I'm Latoya Thomas with Brick and Story and part of the consultant team that's leading up stakeholder engagement, and you'll meet some of our other team members tonight. Just for some tech logistics, we're obviously on Zoom this evening, where we've got an hour and a half set for tonight. We may not need the full time, but we're going to walk all of you through a presentation that'll take about 30 to 40 minutes. We do have a Q&A box open, so you can ask questions through the Q&A box at any time during the presentation, and we have reserved time at the end to go through the Q&A. In terms of how we're receiving questions, the Q&A box is the primary way we're going to receive questions. We've left the chat box open for attendees to communicate directly with the host or panelist if you're having some kind of a technical issue, so please feel free to use it for that purpose, but we'll be referencing the Q&A box for all questions. With that, let me turn it over to Heba Algawish from the DC Office of Planning.
Thanks, Latoya, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. It's a beautiful fall day, so thanks for taking some time to tune in and participate in this webinar. So I'm going to take a moment here to share my screen and get going with this presentation. Latoya, can I get a confirmation that this is working?
Yeah,
all right,
it's working.
Great. So again, thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar where we will be presenting on the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines, specifically where we are in the process and what we've been hearing from the community so far. And just in terms of what to expect out of this program tonight, we'll be doing a quick, I'm just going to be introducing the team that we have with us here that has been working on this planning effort. I'll go a little bit over kind of a little bit of background about the project and the timeline, some of the engagement activities that we've been undertaking throughout the summer, what we've been hearing from the community, and then what to expect over the next, over the coming weeks and months. So the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines is a planning effort that is being led by the DC Office of Planning. My name is Heba Algawish. I am the project manager on this planning effort. I have a number of names of my colleagues here in the Office of Planning, but I'm being supported by a much larger team in each of our divisions. But specifically, we're being supported, of course, by Historic Preservation Office, since we're dealing with 2 historic districts along this within the study area, as well as my colleague Jonathan Green, community planner, and Vincent O'Bara. And then we're also being supported by a team of consultants led by Smith Group, an urban design consultant firm, as well as Brick and Story, our community engagement team led by Latoya, who just opened up this webinar for us. And Roadside and Harwell, a landscape architecture firm, and Access, a retail market analysis. So those are some of the team members that you will be seeing throughout this planning process and interacting with. So I just wanted to take a moment to give a little bit of background about this planning efforts, especially for those who are new to this process or just tuning in. So as background, in portion of Rock Creek West, particularly along Connecticut Avenue, the comprehensive plan adopted land use designations that allow for greater residential development to increase opportunities for housing and affordable housing production. Specifically in Cleveland Park, the map on the top right, the land use designation was changed from low density commercial to mixed use, medium density residential, and moderate density commercial. And in Woodley Park, the map on the bottom right, the land use designation was changed from low density commercial to a mixed use, high density residential with low density commercial. Those land use designation changes are also supported by a number of policies within the comprehensive plan, a couple which I've highlighted in this slide, such as recognizing the opportunities for infill development in commercial areas to increase mixed-use projects that support affordable housing and retail, and particularly for areas such as Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, ensuring that new and infill development is compatible with the historic character of those neighborhoods by giving careful considerations to careful siting, massing, and design transitions where more intense development is proposed near historic resources. So this is some of the guidance from the comprehensive plan that is informing this process. In addition to the comprehensive plan, there are a couple other studies that are also guiding the Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines. The Mayor's 2019 Housing Equity Report, which set the affordable housing goal for Rock Request at near 2,000 units. And the Rock Request Roadmap, which outlines a number of approaches to produce and preserve affordable housing in Rock Request. As you can see on this table on the left, while financial subsidies support the largest share of creating and preserving affordable units, such as through conversion of existing units to dedicated affordable, land use regulations and large opportunity sites along major corridors play an important role in production of affordable housing, which is what we are exploring through this planning process. And as part of the implementation of the comprehensive plan and the housing equity goals, the Office of Planning, as I mentioned, is undertaking this Connecticut Avenue Development Guidelines study in order to look at how the land use designations established under the updated comprehensive plan can be leveraged to maximize housing opportunities in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park commercial areas. The study area encompasses the corridor, the Connecticut Avenue corridor from Porter Street to the north to Calvert Street to the south, and will focus on design strategies for infill and new development that looks at how mixed-use development can happen in a way that fits within the historic fabric of those neighborhoods. So through this planning process, we're working with our design consultant team and the community to identify sites and properties that have an opportunity to redevelop and model massing scenarios for new construction and additions. The modeling will help us identify appropriate design strategies, including height transitions, such as setbacks and upper story building stepbacks, building street wall design strategies that support an active and lively commercial corridor, and also looking at building materials and articulation that create a visual connection between new development and historic buildings. In addition, we'll also be looking at public space and streetscape enhancements that support future mixed-use development and strengthen the corridor sense of place. The goal is to set clear development guidelines and expectations for future applications that would require Historic Preservation Review Board review. So in terms of the project timeline and milestones, we kick things off in the summer with a number of engagement activities, which I will get into more in the following slides. This fall, we're launching a series of engagement activities, starting with this webinar tonight, to report back on what we've heard and start to have those design conversations and explore development scenarios with the community. The study is expected to culminate with a draft report for public review in winter of 2023 and a final report in spring of 2023. During that time, we'll continue to hold public outreach events and activities, and we would also be briefing the HPRB along the way and seeking HPRB approval of the final report in the spring. So in addition to public outreach that we've been doing throughout the summer, we've also been gathering data around existing conditions in the study area, as well as conducting an assessment of public life and public space along Connecticut Avenue, which have been released on the project website as of last Sunday in the form of 2 reports. And we'll share the links at the end. Well, actually, I put it on the slide up here, and it's under the resources tab. The existing conditions report provide an overview of history, demographics, land use, and public space conditions in and around the study area. And the public life study is a data-driven assessment of social activities that take place in the public sphere. So as I mentioned, the existing conditions report is really organized in 3 sections. The first section outlines the study area and its surrounding demographics, social, economic, and housing trends. Section 2 is a series of maps illustrating land uses and development within the study area. And section 3 describes the study area's building and streetscape characteristics. And as for the public life study, as I mentioned, is a data-driven study of how people move through and use public space in order to make informed decisions around any potential streetscape and public space enhancement. This entails counting pedestrians at specific locations along the corridor, observing stationary people, such as those standing or sitting, and conducting intercept surveys to understand what brought people to the area and how they arrived. And those two reports, in tandem with the engagement that we're doing, will be informing the development of design strategies and recommendations as part of this planning effort. As I've mentioned, we've been conducting a number of outreach activities throughout the summer to understand what the communities value about the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park neighborhoods today, and how they would like future development to contribute positively to the area in the future. We've deployed a variety of outreach methods in order to ensure we're reaching a broad and diverse audience, from traditional structured engagement activities, such as community walks and online surveys, to pop-ups and focus groups in order to meet people where they are. In addition to an OP-led community walk where 40 people participated, the Cleveland Park Historical Society hosted an architecture walk on June 28th in the Cleveland Park neighborhood, focusing on the architecture of Cleveland Park, and 20 people participated at the CPHS hosted walk. We've also held a number of pop-ups, such as tabling at the Cleveland Park Farmers Market on a couple occasions, the Cleveland Park Library, at the Woodley Park Art All Night, and we've also been able to table in the lobby of an apartment building in order to meet residents there. We've also launched a visioning survey that ran from July 1st to August 11th. And with the survey, we also provided the option of taking a virtual self-guided walk for those who weren't able to attend in person. In the next few slides, I'll be diving a little bit more into the responses and feedback we've received through the online survey. But we've also summarized some of the general sentiments that we've heard during the community walks, which was also echoed through some of the comments submitted through the survey and other conversations we've had with the community. We've heard comments around streetscape priorities, such as increased public seating, more pedestrian and bike-friendly environment, more public art and wayfinding signage, particularly around the Woodley Park and the zoo. And in terms of housing considerations, there was an emphasis on increased options for larger sized units, as well as affordable homeownership options. People also expressed the importance of increased housing development to support greater socioeconomic diversity and a thriving retail corridor. And then some of the initial thoughts on building design centered around the opportunity to preserve existing historic buildings while adding more residential on top, using landscaping and building step backs to transition to surrounding lower scale residential homes. So as part of the online survey, we started by asking people what characteristics they would use to describe the area today and how they would like to describe it in the future. We used these word clouds to highlight the words that people used most frequently when they responded to those questions. Describing the area today as walkable, historic, friendly, green, and convenient, and looking into the future, describing it as affordable, vibrant, remaining friendly, and bikeable. And then the survey included a number of multiple choice questions, and the next few slides show how participants prioritize those responses. In some instances, we'll show the overall responses from participants, and then we'll also look at a breakdown of those responses by homeowners and renters. So for this question, we asked participants to select in what ways new housing development could positively impact the community. Overall, respondents identified greater support for local businesses, more customers supporting retail, and greater socioeconomic diversity as the top 3 positive outcomes. In looking at the responses by a breakdown of homeowners and renters, homeowners identified more customers in the area leading to increased retail as the top positive outcome, as well as greater support for local businesses, while renters identified greater socioeconomic diversity as what they see as the greatest positive outcome. And then around affordable housing, overall responses identified 1 to 2 and 3 bedroom units as the most needed types of affordable housing, as well as affordable housing, affordable homeownership options. And then again, looking at the breakdown by homeowners and renters, homeowners identified 3 bedroom units as a priority for affordable housing, while renters prioritized 1 to 2 bedroom. Both groups also identified affordable homeownership options as a priority. We also asked current residents to reflect on their ability to stay in the Cleveland Park and/or Woodley Park neighborhoods and identify what housing factors that may be of concern. So for overall responses, current rent prices and lack of adequate amenities rose to the top of concerns that current residents have that affect their ability to remain in the neighborhood. Again, looking at the breakdown, homeowners identified, and I apologize for the overlap of the text on those slides. Looking at the breakdown, homeowners identified lack of amenities as the greatest concern, while renters largely identified current rent prices as a factor that may influence their ability to stay in the neighborhood. We also had similar questions targeted to non-residents, specifically asking what housing factors make the neighborhoods attractive to move to, and what factors might hinder their ability to access housing in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. Respondents identified proximity to amenities as the most attractive factor that would that attracts them to those neighborhoods, and identified home sale prices and rent prices as factors that may inhibit their ability to access housing in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. So as I mentioned, part of this effort is also to look at potential streetscape and public space enhancements to support a thriving mixed-use commercial district. And the survey included a number of questions related to public space challenges and opportunities that exist along the corridor. The next few series of questions are divided up by those 3 zones highlighted in red on the map, starting with Woodley Park, and then looking at the zoo entrance area, and then looking at the Cleveland Park commercial area. I do want to acknowledge that we are aware and factoring into this project the Cleveland Park Streetscape and Drainage Project that DDOT is currently undertaking, which is also under construction. Any streetscape recommendations for that part of the corridor would be complementary to that effort. So for the Woodley Park area, in terms of public space, respondents identified vacant and deteriorating storefronts, as well as lack of places to sit as some of the biggest challenges. And then in terms of opportunities, respondents identified additional public open space and seating areas as some of the most promising opportunities for improvement. For the zoo entrance, respondents identified crowded sidewalks and lack of places to sit, relax, and meet people as some of the top challenges in that area. And then looking at opportunities for improvement through additional seating areas and more street furniture and wider sidewalks. And then lastly, in terms of public space for Cleveland Park, similarly identifying vacant and deteriorating storefronts and lack of places to sit as some of the challenges that face the public space in Cleveland Park. And then in terms of opportunities, looking at additional public open space and small seating areas, as well as sufficient space for outdoor dining and safer pedestrian crossings in Cleveland Park. We also had some questions related to some of the retail and amenities that residents access in the 2 commercial areas, the Woodley Park and Cleveland Park. And for Woodley Park, respondents identified sit-down and full-service restaurants as some of the popular retail services that they currently access in the Woodley Park neighborhood. Hardware store came second, although from my understanding, the Ace Hardware is closed in Woodley Park now. And then respondents identified the grocery store as an amenity that they currently leave the Woodley Park neighborhood in order to access. And then for Cleveland Park, respondents identified grocery store as one of the popular retail services and service that they currently access within this commercial neighborhood or commercial area, as well as sit down and full service restaurants, and a hardware store and coffee shops as some of the amenities that they go outside of the neighborhood in order to access. So since the focus of the study is on building design and urban design, we started asking people to share what their favorite buildings are in the neighborhood. And one of the features that kept being repeated were the Art Deco apartment buildings along Connecticut Avenue, such as the Kennedy Warren and the Art Deco style commercial buildings in Cleveland Park, such as the Uptown Theater. The Cleveland Park Library was also mentioned as a good example of a modern building that was successfully designed to complement the neighborhood's historic architecture, which you'll also see highlighted in this slide, where we asked people to share examples of newer development that successfully blended old and new features within historic districts. Responses to this question really showed a variety of perspectives, from people preferring new development that used contrasting materials to adjacent historic buildings, and others showing preference to new development that tried to match the original architecture, such as the Kennedy Warren South Wing addition. Some of the neighborhoods that were mentioned where new development was successfully integrated within historic preservation were the Eastern Market, Capitol Hill area, 14th Street, especially near U Street, Adams Morgan, and some other specific projects like the Park Van Ness and the Cleveland Park Library, as well as the Line Hotel in Adams Morgan. And this slide shows some more examples from places that people mentioned in the survey, particularly outside of the district, such as Old Town, Alexandria, Boston, and even some examples in Europe, such as Edinburgh in Scotland was mentioned. Another example here is also on 14th Street. I recently developed an apartment building between W and V Street, which included the preservation of several historic buildings along 14th Street. So, as I mentioned early on, in addition to scheduled meetings and activities, we've also held a number of targeted outreach and pop-ups over the last couple of months. We wanted to make sure we're making space for different perspectives to convene in smaller groups and have more of a dialogue specifically around challenges and opportunities to creating housing and affordable housing in Rock Creek West. We held a focus group with community organizations and advocacy groups who work in the affordable housing space in Ward 3, as well as developers who have had experience or own property in Rock Creek West. And this slide summarizes some of what we shared during those conversations, or some of what was shared during those conversations. Community groups in Ward 3 really emphasized the need for creating affordable housing across all income levels and household sizes, as well as housing types. The group highlighted that there should be a concerted effort to increase affordable housing near transit, particularly for those at extremely low income brackets. The group also offered opportunities for forming partnerships between advocacy groups and developers to ensure that projects are delivering on community priorities. And for the developers focus group, a number of challenges to developing mixed-use projects were shared, such as restrictions placed by zoning regulations, specifically around limiting restaurant types and quantities in certain areas, as well as some of the historic preservation requirements that might increase the cost of a project. Retail pickup, drop-off, and adequate parking were also some of the concerns that were mentioned. The group also outlined a number of opportunities, such as increased density, which can support affordable housing developers in offsetting land acquisition costs, and emphasized the importance of not placing all housing priorities on one development project, such as the priorities around larger unit sizes, deeper affordability, and greater set-aside percentages. And then finally, through our interactions with residents, both longtime and newer to the neighborhood, at pop-up events, we heard some of the factors that attracted residents to the neighborhood, such as the proximity to the metro and downtown, as well as amenities such as Rock Creek Park and the Oyster Adams bilingual school on Calvert Street. Especially in Woodley Park, we heard the need for a full-service grocery store and other dining options, and a general sense that retailers and restaurants are seem to be struggling in the area. So going back to the project schedule, as I mentioned, we're gearing up for a series of community design conversations that will be happening over the next couple of weeks, where we'll really start to explore these design guidelines and design strategies that can inform future development as it occurs, and how the massing and height transitions and building form can really be done in a way that is compatible with the historic district. So we'll walk through those on the next slide, and I'll turn it over to LaToya to kind of walk us through the format of these community design conversations and what to expect from those events.
Thanks, Heba. So as Heba mentioned, we are coming into the season for our community design conversations. We have two coming up, which you can see here on the screen. The first one will be focused on Woodley Park on Saturday, October 15th, followed by one focused on Cleveland Park on Saturday, October 22nd. The way that these are designed is a combination open house workshop experience. Some of you may have participated in other workshops hosted by either the Office of Planning or other district agencies that may have been more traditional planning design charrettes, where you may have had to commit several hours of your weekend to participating in this process. We tried to design this in as an accessible way as possible so that as many people can participate as is feasible for them. With the way that these community design conversations are set up, we have a 3-hour time block when we will be at these locations. We'll have a fully facilitated experience for you to come through. It is drop in, so if you would like to come and stay for 15 minutes, we'll have stations for you to walk through and to get the information and ask questions and provide input in that amount of time. If you want to come and stay for the full 3 hours, you're welcome to do that as well. And we'll also have some interactive facilitated conversation tables where you'll be able to dive in deeper to some of the topics that will be featured at the stations. Again, we encourage all of you to come out, whether it's for 5 minutes or 3 hours. And if for some reason you also can't make the design conversations on the days that they're hosted, we will be having online versions of all of the workshops as well. And we'll have some time open once all of the content gets posted online for you to be able to interact with those stations virtually, as well as provide your input in an online platform. And all of that will get incorporated throughout the next several weeks as we continue to go through this process. How about you want me to turn it back to you for any final remarks before we open up for questions?
No, thanks for that, LaToya. And I think we can start to take some of the questions.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the Q&A box. There was a question I answered at the top, and I'll just state that response to the question as well, which was, is the recorded session going to be available online? And yes, it will be available online at the publicinput.com website that you actually see on your screen right now. So let me jump through the questions that are in the Q&A box. I'm going to start from the top. Most of the property in the study area is privately owned, except for Intelsat and UDC, which are on federal land, not in the study area. Is the goal to facilitate infill development by private owners that will provide affordable rental opportunities in small buildings at varying levels of affordability?
Yes, that's correct. The development guidelines are geared towards kind of putting together a set of parameters for private property owners and developers as they come forward with development projects and applications to kind of apply these designs guidelines to ensure that their proposals are compatible with the nature of the historic districts. And with that, kind of encouraging the increase of set aside affordable units within mixed use, mixed income development. And that's specifically focused in the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park commercial districts.
All right, for our next question. If the current strategy to diversify Cleveland Park is predicated on housing subsidies from the city, how sustainable is this strategy? What are the resources to support residents who are receiving this benefit from the city?
So the strategy is focused on maximizing the density opportunity afforded by the future land use map in the comprehensive plan. So density is really the incentive for creating more residential, housing production in Cleveland Park and Woodley Park, and with that increasing opportunities for set aside affordable units as part of these developments. Typically developers might need further financial subsidies in order to whether to create deeper affordability levels, whether to assist with land acquisition. So there are different financial programs that can assist developers with gap financing. And then in terms of resources for residents, typically the set aside units are run through the inclusionary zoning program, which is administered by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So once those developments come online and those units come online, the set aside inclusionary units are then run by DHCD.
All right, next question, is development above Sam's Park and Shop possible under the amended comp plan?
So the Sam's Park and Shop is part of was within the area where the land use designation has changed. So that could be an opportunity site. That being said, a large portion of the Sam's Park and Shop is what is considered a contributing building to the historic district and would need to be preserved. So there would need to be considerations of both preservation of the existing historic building and looking at opportunities for additional development on that site.
Regarding different responses from owners and renters, did you have enough responses to make the differences statistically significant?
So we kind of filtered those responses by the respondents who identified as renters and the respondents who identified as homeowners. And of course, those are self-identifying questions. We do recognize that, because the survey kind of garnered more responses from homeowners as compared to the demographics of the area. So there was an overrepresentation of respondents who identified as homeowners compared to what the census shows as the demographics, where renters are kind of make up almost 60% of residents. And that is why we wanted to look at the breakdown by homeowners and renters to see the responses by that kind of demographic housing tenure.
All right, this question is a long one. I'm going to try to summarize the core questions from here, and this will be posted just for folks to see the full question that's being asked. There are concerns from an attendee around, attendee who lives in the neighborhood around specifically proposal for low-income individuals who may move into the community with mental health issues. They've cited an increase in Section 8 residents at Macomb, Connecticut, as well as an increase in crime. Specifically, he is asking, where are you proposing to put low-income housing units? How many are you proposing? Will police be stationed? And and larger concerns around any links between residents who may move to the community and crime.
Sure. So again, the intent of this effort and the goal is to develop a set of design guidelines that would inform future private development. And the number of units is going to be dependent on the size of the development, the lot, the requirements, and kind of it's going to be based on each project as it comes forward. We'll be looking at some example sites and start to model kind of building massing and form scenarios to see, you know, what envelope can fit within a number of sites and how many units could be achieved through that. So we'll be looking at that through the community conversations. In terms of assistance and, you know, low income residents and services, you know, affordable housing is, we're looking at ensuring that there's housing options across income levels. And, you know, many residents with steady jobs in the district are burdened by the high cost of housing. Generally, those are, you know, people who may be teachers or, you know, in the service industry or firemen. Typically, those salaries do not support the type of rents and sales that we see in the district. And that is why we want to make sure that we're increasing housing affordability across income brackets. For those people who do need kind of deeper services, you know, the district provides long-term rental assistance and case management services and just wraparound services that the district provides for those who need them.
The next question is, there's some concern from an attendee around the seriousness of developing affordable housing in this community compared to the preservation of a parking lot in an underutilized one-story shopping center.
Sure. I mean, we want to look at kind of all sorts of opportunities, and there might be instances where there is an opportunity if there are non-contributing buildings to kind of look at a fully new development that could probably maybe achieve a higher number of units. We also recognize that we're working within the parameters of a historic district. There are historic preservation requirements, and looking at what are opportunities for infill development that could still maximize the production of housing units, but working within kind of and taking into account the historic resources along the corridor.
All right, next, this one's a bit more of a comment. There's concern expressed around disruption related to construction and what it might pose for folks who currently live there, as well as concerns about increased traffic congestion for as new residents begin to arrive into the neighborhood as more buildings are built, and what that would also mean for disruption caused by the proposed bike lanes, largely concern around crowding, overcrowding, and diminishing quality of life. I don't know if there's any comments you want to offer to that.
I mean, I would say that, again, with the update to the future land use map, the intent was to increase opportunities for residential development, particularly around high capacity transit and metro stations, like Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. And those are high opportunity areas where there is a need and they could accommodate more housing units.
Next question, is it fair to say the success of the changes we're contemplating depends on developers wanting to develop these smaller mixed-use buildings?
We're trying to create the conditions that would kind of incentivize property owners or developers to kind of look at opportunities to maximize housing production. So yes, it is dependent ultimately on property owners choosing to redevelop their properties, but at the same time, making sure that the conditions are so that it makes economic sense for those who wish to redevelop. And to do that while being able to provide a greater set aside affordable housing.
Next question, are there any plans for the historic Uptown Theater? And if so, are you able to share?
I don't think I know much beyond what the community knows, which there was interest in reopening it as a theater, but there hasn't been much movement, and I don't know if there has been any permits submitted, so I don't know much beyond that. And I think there was an application to landmark it recently too.
The next question is specifically about the Wardman Park. If there's any update you can share on what that development plan is, particularly for people-dense activities, traffic congestion, bike, car, pedestrian conflict, etc.
So the Woodley Park Hotel kind of moved forward with a matter of right development, and they put forward an application in front of HPRB earlier this year and was supported by HPRB. So we were, we do acknowledge that we saw the Woodley Park Hotel as a large opportunity site for greater housing affordability. However, as I mentioned, the property owner chose to go through a matter of right development and use their underlying zone.
Next question, is this process about urban updating and renewal or about increasing low-income housing in these neighborhoods?
It's really about increasing housing choice in a high opportunity area like Rock Creek West, where it has the least number of dedicated affordable housing in the district, and just increasing housing access in areas like Cleveland Park and Woodley Park for people of varying income brackets, including moderate and low income households.
Next question, have you engaged the zoo in this planning process? It's noted that since many visitors to the area go to the zoo during different times of the year, it seems they should be part of the discussion regarding crowded sidewalks and amenities in that area.
Yeah, sure. We've done a public life study where we kind of surveyed the zoo area and looked at some of the challenges there. DDOT will also be communicating with them as part of their multimodal study along Connecticut Avenue to also understand what their plans are for the future within the zoo, outside the zoo, and the public space. But yes, we recognize that there are challenges with both pedestrian and traffic congestion and safety pedestrian crossing safety in this area, and we'll be looking at it for strategies to improve the public space there and pedestrian safety.
All right, we have a comment. The gas station property at Connecticut and Porter could be developed into below ground parking and 3 to 4 or 5 stories of residential and small retail. We have a question. Do you know that, or if low and moderate income individuals and families even want to live in Rock Creek West?
Again, the intent is to create to increase housing choice and access. As I mentioned, for non-residents who responded to the survey, they've indicated that they see the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park areas as attractive for their amenities, proximity to transit, to schools, to parks, but also identifying the prohibitively high rents and high home sale values as a barrier to access housing. We'll be continuing to do targeted outreach, to other kind of groups across the district to kind of get a better understanding of the barriers to accessing housing in Rock Creek West.
Let's see, next question. I'm looking at moving into the neighborhood in Cleveland Park, specifically in a rental. That said, when I visit many apartment buildings and do my research, I learn about police activity in the buildings. As a single older woman, I'm concerned about personal security in my place of residence. What kind of support proposals are there to keep renters safe in their rental buildings as affordable housing considerations are implemented?
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned, the district does have, you know, services, and they continue to improve their communications with residents to quickly address any kind of service needs and assist households with any needs that they have. I can't mention those programs and services off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up with any specific questions around that.
Heba, if I can also add to this question, part of this process is also going to be around providing education around what we mean by affordable housing and affordability. Just with the tenor of some of the questions that are coming through tonight as well, there is often a very poor association of affordable housing with violence or violent people, or with people trying to make a correlation between low-income people and lack of public safety. We know that there's incidents that happen across the city, but the goal of this particular project is really thinking about affordability at a broad spectrum and understanding that, as Heba said, that there's a great need for increasing supply at various income ranges, whether that's for people who are incredibly low income and may need support services, all the way up to families who are working 1 or 2 jobs and are struggling to afford their housing cost. And the reality is that as part of the study, it's very clear that Rock Creek West doesn't have a lot of supply to be able to help meet that need across the city. So again, I encourage all of you to continue to ask questions, but also to participate throughout this process, because we also want to make sure that people are getting accurate information about what we mean when we talk about housing affordability. Moving on to the next question. For the Wardman Park, do you know if demolition has been permitted with details for public space, environmental controls, dump truck routes, etc.?
I believe the Wardman did apply for a raise application around the end of last year in 2021, and there is some demolition activity. I don't know the details around that in terms of kind of the truck routes and what kind of mitigation, environmental mitigation that they're doing. I'm happy to follow up on that if needed, but I don't know the details of the raise application.
Are there dedicated resources, foundations or grants, for example, to incentivize developers to use Art Deco design instead of other building or facade styles?
I don't know if we have some of our historic preservation staff here. I don't know of specific grants to incentivize developers to use a certain architectural style over another. I can definitely follow up with our historic preservation office staff to see if there are any grants regarding kind of using certain building materials. Certainly there are grants for preservation of facades and that sort of thing, but I can get more details around those. But I don't know if anyone from the design team can chime in. Otherwise, I'm happy to follow up with the historic preservation team.
I do not know an answer to that, Heba.
I'm just reading this next question. We have another comment / question from an earlier question. Someone who's specifically interested in understanding the exact addresses where affordable or low income housing will be located. That information is not available right now. And again, I would suggest that, as you said, you're going to come on the 22nd. I would suggest that you come to the 22nd to ask your questions, but also to learn more about the process and to also learn more about affordable housing and what it really means for this project. And Heba, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think. Thanks for covering that. And I just want to say, for those who have had questions about the survey or want to, dive in even more into those responses, the survey report was also released on the project website. So publicinfo.com/RCW-Connecticut. It's on the bottom of the slide. And if you go to the past events tab, there will be a link to the survey report.
And while we give folks another minute or two to see if there's any final questions that they want to ask before we wrap up this evening, I will also mention with respect to our upcoming events, Heba mentioned earlier in our presentation that we have done several focus groups and pop-ups already. We are planning to do several more over the next couple of weeks to really try to hear from a broad reach of stakeholders. And that includes getting input from low and moderate income households, as well as service providers who might work with some of those households. We're also looking to engage with younger families that might be in Rock Creek West that may not be as plugged into this process because they may have young children and family obligations that don't make them as easily available for these events. We are also interested in hearing the perspective of households of color, particularly Black homeowners that currently live in Rock Creek West, whether they have been there 30 or 40 years or have moved there in recent years, to really understand their unique perspectives around living in this community. So I'm highlighting all of that to let folks know that we've got obviously a number of different ways we're trying to engage with people, but also there's a variety of different perspectives around life in Rock Creek West, what it is now, what it has been, and where the possibilities are for the future. So again, we want to encourage all of you to stay connected and continue to engage with us throughout this process. Any final questions from our participants before I turn it back to Heba? Or any comments from the consultant team? How does one register to receive updates?
Yes, good question. Also on the project website, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to fill in kind of a sign up section, just your name and your email, and we'll send updates as we kind of set up engagement activities or post things on the website. We'll typically send an email just to let people know of upcoming activities. But again, I echo Latoya. I do want to encourage all of you. Well, thank you first for, again, tuning in tonight, and definitely encourage you all to join us at these community design conversations, both in Woodley Park and in Cleveland Park. There'll be a lot of materials to engage with, and we're looking forward to really diving into these kind of development massing scenarios and, exploring what the community kind of wants to see happen as development occur, and what kind of design considerations should be prioritized.
All right, well, with that, we will let everyone go back to their regularly scheduled programming this evening. Thank you again for your time. This recording will be available online in the next couple of days, so please stay tuned. And we hope to see all of you at one or both of our upcoming events over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So thank you again and have a great evening.
Thank you.